the how. How do you approach strategies with folks? How do you approach like...
Yeah, so that's where that's almost hard to say out loud because it's so highly individual for people. But it starts with
Phil Phails for you.
I was going to totally monkey that up for you. You got it. It starts with framework. So meaning, let's just hypothetically say I have all the information, right? So let's just jump forward a month or so. And
You've done intake. Yeah.
You've done all the intake. We've got the lab work. We got the GMAP or whatever.
You've got all that stuff.
Or let's say they didn't do lab work in GMAP. It doesn't matter. I start with framework, meaning let's just say they're doing everything, meaning like I mentioned earlier, sometimes people don't want the exercise or don't want this piece or whatever. But let's just say they're like, I'm here for it. Let's all encompassing. So we start with framework, meaning again, this isn't cookie cutter. So I'm not going to give everybody the same thing.
Right.
But we're going to talk through injuries in their body. So we'll talk about exercise. I'll give them framework for exercise. I will create exercise prescription for them. So meaning we're going to talk about resistance training. We're going to talk about, I'm trying to think of a word that I use, mobility, essentially. So typically that anything from yoga to foam rolling to stretch labs or whatever, whatever. But we talk about resistance training. We talk about mobility. I talk about steps because I think and meeting somebody where they are, right? So let's just say they have a desk job that they can't get away from. Let's say they work in a company that refuses to give them a standing desk, whatever the case may be. We'll talk about steps and just and increasing anyone's NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So what is their day-to-day movement?
Yeah.
Right. So we'll talk about framework for steps of a reasonable SMART goal, right? So like, what does that look like for where they are? And then I'll talk about cardio, and that doesn't have to be like I'm getting on the treadmill or elliptical for 30 minutes, but like just generally. So like exercise, I will create a plan for them based on their injuries and body and goals, right? So I'll create, that includes all those things, right? So I create an exercise prescription and how often and how much and all of that. So we give them that. Then I'll give them nutrition. So typically nutrition, again, like a lot of options here, but I will often, again, some people not, but often give them calories and macros. So we talk about like how much of their carbs, fats, and proteins. I will give them calories based on their goals, whether they're, trying to gain muscle or lose fat or both or whatever that looks like. So whether we're going into a deficit or not, and when and how often, and that'll also, that kind of goes as we go. But I'll give them an initial framework. I'll create a meal plan for somebody. And this will be kind of twofold. So one, it's really a meal plan template. So I am not giving them exactly what to eat every day all the time. That's not sustainable. But I will give them some examples of what would fit what I just told them to do.
Like proper ratios of fat, protein, and
like
carb?
an actual, well, sure. I'm going to give them that too. I'll give them ratios. I will give them grams, but then I will create an actual meal plan of
food that they can make.
That.
Okay.
And it fits with fiber and all the macros and the calories I give them. I typically do 4 days. So you'll do 4 days that are completely different to give them ideas. This is not like, I don't want you to live and breathe by these 4 days and only eat those foods all the time. But I will give them a good balance of 4 different breakfast options, 4 different lunch options, 4 different snack options, 4 different and recipes, right? So I give them like
whole thing,
whole cat and caboodle for that. And even talk about timing and when they eat, whether they're intermittent fasting or whether they're not, and how often I want them to eat, which again might correlate, and even foods to eat and not to eat. So this might be, which is not always the case, but based on lab work, based on GI mapping, there may be a treatment plan.
Elimination diet type of thing?
No, not exactly. More so, I mean, I might take someone through that, but that's a whole nother cat and caboodle. More so, depending on what they have going on, cholesterol or blood sugar wise, I might say, okay, we need less of these foods and more of these foods, right?
Because the question I'm getting at is like, how do you figure out which of the foods that people have are causing inflammation?
So great question. So I'll answer that while finishing the thought.
Go ahead.
So which is great, but it correlates. So basically, if someone has high cholesterol or has diabetes, well, okay, they have diabetes, so we need to reduce our sugar and what that looks like. So I will make it simple. I was gonna say dumb it down, but make it simple. Like I will give them lists of foods that we should have less of or none of or whatever. And then also with a GI map, depending on what they have going on, I may need them like candida. I may want them to stay away from sugars is also one because it feeds candida. So like there might be really specific things. I might need them a specific amount of fiber. I might need them to stay away, you know, if they have H. pylori, I might need to stay away from high nickel foods and things that will aggravate certain overgrowths. So I will tailor and give them real specific foods.
High nickel foods?
like
what is a high nickel food?
Cocoa and chocolate.
These are things that have nickel in them?
Yes.
I just think about that nickel like a 5-cent piece, but nickel's
yes.
It's an element. It's a mineral.
Yeah.
And it's in cocoa.
It's in cocoa. It's in soybeans.
Okay. Goodness, y'all research it. Nickel defending it comes in your food.
And then some people need a low nickel diet for specific, like histamine reasons and whatever. But a lot of that, if it's related to the GI map and microbiome, a lot of that's temporary. It's a part of a treatment plan. So I might give them a real specific plan of certain foods and supplements and how long and when and whatever. So I'll give them nutrition. I'm going to come back to your other question in a second. About
inflammation.
Food. I'll come back to that. So I'll give them a nutrition plan. I'll give them an exercise plan. We then talk about stress. And what they're doing every day, what they're doing, or if they're doing anything to help process stress.
Coping strategies.
So, and if they have any, and if they're doing them, I would say more often than not. Every now and then I'll have somebody who's like, "Ooh, I'm a daily meditator," and I'm like, "Ooh, but for the most part, people are like, "Well, yeah, I go on walks or something." I'm like, "Okay, we need more depth to that." And it's not about removing the stress. I mean, sure, if you can remove the stress, please do.
That's just easy.
Obviously,
remove the stress. Okay, done.
Just quit being stressed.
Done.
But more about how we're processing stress. And so I spend a decent bit of time on that. Let's talk about like what you're doing for that and helping. How can we get the stress to move through the body? It's like building a muscle. So maybe they want to take up meditation. Well, that's not going to be an overnight thing. It's a process to build that up. Maybe they want to start doing grounding. Again, not an overnight thing. Maybe they want to do journaling or therapy or whatever. Anyway, so all these things that are stress relieving, but how can we create a system to that? So that then the stress piece of it, and then I'll talk about like water and sleep too. So I'll create a plan for them. And then I say, all right, try it. I'm going to try it.
F around and find out.
Try it for 1 week or 2 weeks, depending on how often we're meeting. Go try it. And they have full access of me. 24/7. They have full access of me.
They'll text you.
And and most people are really reasonable about, usually have somebody.
They need to be reasonable. Right.
But I tell them, you have free reign of me as you're trying this out, but also I don't want you to be perfect. I want you to get your feet wet. And so then they come back and they're like, all right, well, this didn't work. Well, this was hard. Well, stress eating. Well, this, I have no idea how to do these macros. Well, cool. Then we know where to focus.
Right.
And also, we're also not going to try all of those things. Let's start here. And again, depending on like what is most prevalent for them, right? They're like, all right, I did a pretty good job with this, but I can't meal prep for life me. All right, well, let's talk about your day to day. Let me strategize with you about how to do that. And then I'll give them tools. I might send them things on meal prepping and send them and talk about that, or talk about like, ooh, okay, so on the days that your daughter has soccer, could you do it like this or whatever? So I give them ways that might feel overwhelming, but I'm like, I can give you some tools to try. And maybe we just work on that. Or maybe they're killing it on food and exercise, but they're drinking 20 ounces of water a day. All right, cool. Let's talk about strategies for that. Let's try this sort of bottle. Let's like set reminders. Can you put your water cup next to the coffee maker? So you have to drink a glass of water every time you have a cup of coffee or whatever. So like, can we habit couple things? So really people tell their own story of what they need. I'll give them some framework to just like go play and try and then come back. And then we know what you need to work on. I mean, they may already know, but then we know exactly by trial and error how to strategize around the things.
Right. It's partially education, right?
Yeah.
You're teaching them things.
Yeah.
And then when they learn things, they kind of change. And it's part of it is like, hey, I want you to do science.
Yeah.
I want you to try something and then tell me the results. And then we'll hone it in.
We'll figure out what went wrong.
Figure it out together.
What goes wrong for you might be something completely different from what goes on with somebody else.
infinite. Like they
Yeah.
say, no two snowflakes are the same.
Right.
Like I imagine
Absolutely.
we're at least as complex as a snowflake.
Probably
So
more.
none of us are the same.
Right.
So
Yeah.
with each one, you're working to figure out what's going to be optimal.
Yeah. And also figuring out, I mean, like, and there's so many layers to that. And so that's what, I don't know why I kind of hate the idea of an onion layer thing, but it is a little bit peeling that back.
Yeah.
So initially I'm having trouble hitting my calories and macros, or maybe I'm having trouble hitting protein. Well, then maybe some of that is because I'm really stressed because I'm going through a divorce and I can't actually put focus on that because there's all of this. Well, then maybe we actually need to shift our focus to self-care and stress relief so that you have the bandwidth to prep your food, right? And so there are like so many layers to that.
Draw a therapist in. Let's get you a therapist. Let's get someone that's helping your mental health side.
Absolutely. And some of it, like I'm layered in for, right? So like I do some layer of counseling with what we're doing.
Yeah.
But depending on the depths, it might be like, all right, like this would be a good thing for you to get added support with, whatever.